Misfortune is contagious. One meal with the wrong person can infect your destiny. There is a silent assassin in every room. It doesn't carry a weapon. It doesn't shout threats. It doesn't even ask for anything out loud. It simply leaks. One complaint at a time, one sigh at a time, one cynical laugh at your hopes. It infects you without contact. This is the law of infection, and it's one of the most underestimated forces in the game of power. Humans are emotional sponges. We absorb the moods, thoughts, and emotional residues of the people around us, even when we think we're immune. Science calls it emotional contagion. Strategy calls it death by association. In the real world, power is not only built by what you do, it is shaped, distorted, and even destroyed by who you stand next to. We like to think we're rational, that we choose our fate based on effort and talent. But your proximity to the wrong energy can ruin years of discipline in a moment of emotional erosion. You've seen it before. The brilliant student who spirals because of a self-destructive partner. The promising employee who loses momentum by clinging to bitter colleagues. The creative genius who drowns in the sorrow of a friend they swore to save. Misery is magnetic, but not in a good way. It disguises itself as vulnerability. It pulls you in through guilt and compassion. And before you know it, you are adapting to someone else's tragedy as if it were your own. This law is not about cruelty. It's not about turning your back on everyone who's going through a hard time. Everyone faces suffering. What this law warns you against is chronic suffering. The person who doesn't want to escape the hole, but wants you to sit in it with them. There are two kinds of people: those who infect you with vision and those who infect you with excuses. The dangerous ones are those who never truly want to rise. They need you to need them. They operate through emotional blackmail. They punish your ambition by making it feel like betrayal. And they'll drag you down, not out of evil, but because they cannot stand watching you leave the darkness they've made home. The tragedy is that they rarely look like threats. They come as friends, lovers, co-workers, broken, vulnerable, full of stories about how the world hurt them. And you? You feel noble for staying. You think you're different, that your strength will help them heal. But strength is not contagious. Weakness is. History is filled with examples. Powerful kings undone by jealous advisors. CEOs brought down by bitter co-founders. Visionaries blinded by emotional loyalty to people who secretly resented their light. One toxic presence in your circle doesn't just slow you down. It warps your decision-making. You begin to censor your dreams so you don't make them feel small. You water down your power to keep them comfortable. You justify their lack of movement as loyalty to the past. And soon, you are no longer leading your own life. You are babysitting someone else's broken timeline. This law isn't about abandoning people. It's about understanding energetic boundaries. There's a reason ancient kings kept fools out of war councils. There's a reason warriors didn't march with mourners. And there's a reason successful people protect their proximity with obsessive caution. Because emotional energy is not neutral. It's either building something or corroding it. Some people are in love with their own failure. They use pain as identity. They collect misfortunes like trophies. If you offer them help, they'll take your hand and never let go. Not to climb, but to keep you down long enough that you forget you were ever rising. You can measure your trajectory by the people around you. If your closest circle is bitter, defeated, blaming others, you're next. Not because you chose their fate, but because you refused to choose your own. The most powerful people in the world aren't always the smartest. They're often just the most disciplined in who they allow into their space. They understand that moods are contagious, narratives are viral, and energy is the real currency of influence. Do you feel more alive after spending time with them, or more tired? That is the only metric that matters. We must develop what Machiavelli called strategic detachment. Not coldness, but clarity. You can love someone and still know they are poison to your mission. You can feel compassion without allowing their shadow to eclipse your vision. You are not obligated to destroy yourself for someone who has made destruction their home. This law is brutal. It doesn't play well in social niceties, but power rarely does. You are the sum of the people you allow into your nervous system. That's not metaphor. It's neuroscience. Let the wrong person stay too long in your emotional space, and you will inherit their fate, because you'll start thinking with their logic, seeing through their lens, and reacting from their fear. You can't build a kingdom in quicksand, and you can't rise while holding hands with someone who refuses to stand. Let go, not because you don't care, but because your mission cannot carry their weight and yours. And if they ever decide to rise, they'll meet you up there on their own feet. The Emperor and the Poisoned Friend, Napoleon and General Moreau. At the height of Napoleon Bonaparte's meteoric rise through revolutionary France, few names carried as much military brilliance as Jean-Victor Marie Moreau. He was not just a peer of Napoleon. At one point, he was considered a rival, a master strategist, a general adored by his troops. Moreau played a critical role in the French victories of the late 1790s. And yet, despite all this promise, he ended his life in exile, disgraced and irrelevant. His fall wasn't caused by a lack of talent or discipline. It was caused by infectious bitterness, the kind that spreads in whispers and corrodes from within. Let's rewind. In the chaotic aftermath of the French Revolution, France was leaderless, its institutions shattered. Generals became symbols of order and hope. Napoleon surged to power through sheer audacity and victories in Italy and Egypt. Moreau, meanwhile, commanded the Army of the Rhine and won a series of impressive campaigns. They were equals, at least in the eyes of the public, but something dark simmered beneath Moreau's surface. While Napoleon cultivated loyalty and momentum, Moreau began absorbing the frustration and resentment of others. His wife, Eugénie Hulot, loathed Napoleon and fed her husband tales of the general's arrogance. Moreau's inner circle included royalists, conspirators, and bitter revolutionaries who saw in him a tool to stop Bonaparte's rise. He didn't act, not yet, but he listened, and that was the first infection. Instead of staying focused on military command, Moreau opened himself to the discontent of the weak and the ambitious, people who had failed to rise on their own and now whispered of betrayal, tyranny, and plots. They told him he was more legitimate than Napoleon. They flattered his sense of honor, of justice, of missed opportunity, and slowly his loyalty fractured. Meanwhile, Napoleon ascended. He orchestrated the coup of 18 Brumaire in 1799, becoming first consul of France. He didn't argue with critics. He didn't explain his moves. He acted, and he won. At this moment, Moreau had a choice. He could remain close to power, serving the new regime, or he could listen to the voices pulling him into darkness. He chose the second. In 1804, Moreau became entangled in the infamous Cadoudal conspiracy, a royalist plot to assassinate Napoleon and restore the monarchy. While Moreau's exact involvement remains debated, his association with known assassins was damning. Napoleon, ever the strategist, didn't need proof. He knew infection when he saw it. A general who surrounds himself with traitors, who tolerates their presence, is no longer clean. Moreau was arrested, tried, shamed, and exiled to the United States. The infection had consumed him. He went from being one of France's brightest military minds to a man wandering foreign soil, ranting about injustice, reduced to a historical footnote in a drama he helped script. And what did Napoleon do? He said nothing. He didn't debate Moreau publicly. He didn't try to justify his removal. He simply let Moreau's infection become visible and removed the limb, like a surgeon, cutting off a gangrenous hand to save the body. Years later, Moreau tried to redeem himself. In 1813, he joined the Russians in fighting Napoleon, now emperor. He was wounded by cannon fire at the Battle of Dresden and died soon after, fighting against the very man he once served beside. Even in death, Moreau's legacy was stained. Historians remember him not just for his brilliance, but for his bitterness, his inconsistency, his self-poisoning. He became the man who couldn't rise on his own, and so aligned himself with those who hated success. Napoleon, on the other hand, built an empire. It wasn't just his military genius, it was his emotional discipline. He was ruthless in who he allowed close. If a friend brought doubt, envy, or indecision, they were cut off. If a family member plotted, they were silenced. Napoleon understood that energy was strategy, that even the best-laid plans would crumble if surrounded by rot. Moreau could have remained a hero. Instead, he became an example, a man who let the unhappy and unlucky into his mind, and then became one himself. Why this law works. The psychology of contagion. In the natural world, infection is often silent. You don't feel the virus enter your bloodstream. You don't hear the bacteria spreading through your organs. You realize you're sick only when the damage has already begun. The same is true in the realm of human interaction. Emotions are contagious. Mindsets are contagious. Worldviews are contagious. And unless you become ruthlessly selective about the emotional ecosystems you allow around you, you risk waking up one day with a mind no longer your own. This law is not just metaphor. It's biological. It's neurological. It's survival. 1. The mirror neuron trap. Why your brain imitates energy. In 1992, neuroscientists studying monkeys discovered what are now called mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when an animal performs an action and when it observes the same action performed by another. These neurons don't just process what someone does, they replicate how it feels. That means when you see someone cry, your brain echoes sadness. When you see anxiety in someone's posture, tone, or facial tension, your nervous system mimics it. Now imagine this happening every day, with someone unhappy, bitter, unlucky, or resentful in your presence. You are not observing them. You are absorbing them. The person you pity may be the virus you cannot fight. 2. The subconscious calculator. Risk detection in tribal brains. For most of human history, survival depended on the tribe. If someone in your group was injured, cursed, unlucky, or failed repeatedly, they posed a risk to everyone. Resources were limited. One weak link could bring predators, famine, or chaos. That's why your subconscious still runs risk calculations, often irrationally, about who is safe to be around. When you consistently associate with someone who loses, your brain begins to equate you with weakness, even if it's not your fault. You start adapting their mental model, their rationalizations, their downward emotional gravity. This is not judgmental, it's protective. Nature assumes that what you tolerate, you accept. What you surround yourself with, you become. 3. Energy transfer is real and cumulative. People radiate energy, not mystical, magical energy, but measurable emotional frequency. This shows up in tone of voice, body tension, tempo of speech, eye contact, facial micro-expressions, and your nervous system is a sponge. It doesn't just read this energy, it sinks to it. There's a reason a room full of optimistic people makes you feel confident. There's a reason hanging out with bitter people leaves you drained, even if nothing was said directly to you. When someone lives in disappointment, they teach your brain that optimism is foolish. When someone complains constantly, they train your focus on obstacles, not possibilities. When someone's entire identity is built on failure, you're not just listening, you're downloading. And these downloads compound. You don't feel the shift in one conversation, but after weeks, months, years, you'll forget who you were before them. 4. Why the unhappy seek company and target the strong. People who are emotionally diseased are rarely content to suffer alone. Misery does love company, not out of evil, but out of survival. Being around someone with clarity, energy, and forward momentum is uncomfortable for them. Your drive exposes their inertia. Your ambition highlights their apathy. Your discipline makes their excuses louder. They must either change or infect. Guess which is easier? They'll tell you you're cold, that you've changed, that you owe them attention or loyalty or empathy. They'll weaponize shared history, appeal to your kindness, and try to make their energy your burden. And if you're not vigilant, you'll take it on. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. This is how infection works. It doesn't need to win a fight. It just needs to stay close. 5. The myth of the empathic savior. Many ambitious, high-performing people fall into the trap of believing they can fix the toxic, unlucky, or chronically miserable. They wear their resilience like armor and believe they're immune. I can lift them up. I won't be dragged down, but that's not how gravity works. You can pull someone for a while. You can motivate them temporarily. But if their default operating system is self-doubt, blame, and failure, eventually your energy will be consumed by maintenance. You'll become their therapist, their life coach, their excuse generator, their emotional oxygen tank. And your mission, your edge, your clarity, it will die quietly. Not because you lost it, but because you gave it away, trying to rescue someone who didn't ask to be saved. 6. Unlucky doesn't mean evil, but it does mean dangerous. It's tempting to think this law is cruel, that it means you should cut ties with anyone going through hardship. That's not the point. Everyone falls, everyone struggles, everyone loses sometimes. But the difference is this. The unlucky are those who stay there. The infected are those who build an identity around their suffering. The dangerous are those who try to make you join them. This law isn't about moments, it's about patterns. If someone fails, but learns, supports, and grows, they're not infected. But if someone repeats the same stories, the same complaints, the same emotional gravity, year after year, they are no longer falling. They are anchoring, and you are their weight. 7. Charisma can mask contagion. Some of the most dangerous infected people wear charisma like a mask. They're funny, charming, witty. They know how to earn sympathy and admiration. They'll tell you how the world did them wrong, and they'll be right, and you'll believe them. That's when the infection takes hold. Because when someone makes victimhood look cool, you adopt their worldview without resistance. You begin to see life through the lens of bitterness, disguised as intelligence. You think you're seeing deeper truths, but you're really just sinking. 8. Avoidance is not weakness, it's mastery. In the game of power, cutting someone off is not always personal. It's not about hate or superiority or coldness. It's about preservation. You have a mission, a path, an identity to build. And not everyone is meant to walk beside you. Even one misaligned energy source can derail a campaign, a business, or a mind. The unhappy and unlucky don't need your saving. What they need is their own awakening. And what you need is distance. Secondary examples: when one person infected the empire. 1. Howard Hughes and the collapse of allies. In the early 20th century, Howard Hughes was the golden boy of American innovation, a filmmaker, engineer, aviator, and business magnate. But as he descended into severe paranoia and obsessive-compulsive behaviors, the people closest to him, especially his personal aides and business partners, began to crumble. One by one, they lost not only their professional reputations, but also their emotional stability. Why? Because Hughes's world became a universe of suspicion, fear, and secrecy. Associates were forced to adapt to his madness or be cast out. They justified it, tolerated it, enabled it, and in doing so, they absorbed it. By the 1960s, anyone too close to Hughes was either emotionally broken or publicly discredited. His infection wasn't viral, it was psychological, and it ruined people without ever touching them physically. 2. Napoleon's brothers: favor, loyalty, and ruin. Napoleon Bonaparte, a master of power, placed his brothers on thrones across Europe. Joseph became king of Spain, Louis the king of Holland, Jerome the king of Westphalia. But these brothers weren't leaders. They were weak men elevated by nepotism. Napoleon believed his influence could compensate for their incompetence, but it didn't. Their poor decisions, corrupt courts, and lack of strategy drained Napoleon's empire. He kept trying to fix them, defend them, control them, but instead, he inherited their failures. By 1814, their incompetence was part of the reason Napoleon's empire collapsed. Even the strongest strategist cannot carry the weight of weak allies forever. 3. Elizabeth Holmes and the echo chamber of delusion. Elizabeth Holmes promised to revolutionize healthcare with Theranos, but she surrounded herself not with critical thinkers, but with yes-men, protectors, and powerful but uninformed backers like Henry Kissinger and George Shultz. They didn't question her technology. They defended her image. As cracks formed, none of them had the technical background to see the flaws. They bet their reputations on her. And when it all collapsed, they shared in the disgrace. Even brilliant minds like Schultz were infected by proximity, not because they were incompetent, but because they tied their identity to a toxic lie. In the end, loyalty to the wrong person became a virus that infected some of the most respected names in American politics and business. 4. John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Genius meets emotional storm. This one is controversial but powerful. John Lennon was one of the most visionary artists of his generation. But during his final years with the Beatles, his deepening relationship with Yoko Ono introduced a chaotic emotional presence into a finely tuned system. Yoko wasn't malicious, but she brought with her emotional turbulence, artistic conflict, and intense personal needs that began to override the band's chemistry. The group fractured, and while the collapse wasn't her fault alone, her influence disrupted the energy equilibrium of the band. Lennon himself became more erratic, withdrawn, and disconnected from his collaborators. In this case, the infection wasn't moral, it was emotional entropy. A single misalignment destabilized an empire of creativity. 5. The Tale of Icarus, flying with the wrong wingman. Let's go mythological for a moment. Icarus was given wings of wax and feather by his father, Daedalus. He was told not to fly too high, lest the sun melt his wings, and not too low, to avoid the sea's moisture. But Icarus flew with hubris, and Daedalus, though wiser, could not prevent his fall. Why include this? Because it represents the tragedy of flying beside someone who ignores limits, who drags you into their trajectory of self-destruction. Icarus didn't infect Daedalus physically, but the father carried the pain, the loss, the consequence. Sometimes, watching someone crash isn't the worst part. Being too close when they fall is. thread that binds them all. In every example above, the infection wasn't always loud. It wasn't obvious, but it was real. It came through. Emotional gravity, Hughes. Familial loyalty, Napoleon. Charismatic blindness, Holmes. Artistic misalignment, Lennon. Mythic hubris, Icarus. And in every case, the price was paid not only by the infected, but by the people who stayed too close for too long. Beginner mistakes. How rookies get infected without knowing. In the beginning, it often feels noble. You see someone suffering, struggling, surrounded by chaos, and your instinct is to help, to be the one who stays when others leave, to be loyal, to be different. That's the first mistake. Most rookies fall into this trap not because they're weak, but because they're empathetic, because they see themselves as saviors, because they mistake proximity for immunity. But power doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards results. And in the game of power, the unhappy and the unlucky carry a contagious energy, one that seeps into your mindset, your reputation, and your future. Let's walk through the most common rookie mistakes, not as abstract theories, but as real behavioral patterns that lead to contamination. 1. Mistaking loyalty for strategy. Rookies believe that loyalty is a virtue in all cases, but in the power game, loyalty must be earned, not assumed. They stay by the side of chaotic leaders, toxic friends, failing partners, because they don't want to seem disloyal. They confuse strategy with emotion, and they absorb the damage. The moment your ally becomes radioactive, your attachment becomes a liability. Staying loyal to a sinking ship doesn't make you noble. It makes you next. 2. Thinking you're the exception. Every infected soul believes they're immune. I'm strong enough. I won't get pulled into it. I can fix them. That's how the virus gets in. Negativity is not just an emotion. It's a behavior, a worldview, a gravitational field. It will pull your energy down, your standards lower, and your time into a black hole. Rookies try to coach the toxic person, to rescue them, to uplift. But the truth is, some people are addicted to their dysfunction, and they don't want to be saved. They want company in their misery. And if you stick around long enough, you become it. 3. Absorbing emotional debts. The unhappy always come with stories. They've been wronged, betrayed, abandoned. Their life is unfair. Rookies listen, empathize, invest, and slowly they take on the emotional debt of another person's life. They defend them in public, cover for them at work, justify their actions, and in doing so, they become tangled in the web. By the time they realize what's happened, they've already burned bridges, lost focus, or wasted years trying to fix someone else's chaos. 4. Staying too long at the table. The seasoned know when to leave. The rookies stay. Why? Because they're afraid of being seen as cold. They don't want to hurt feelings. They fear judgment. So they wait for things to improve, for change to come, for the emotional storm to pass. But in power dynamics, time is compounding, and every hour spent with the wrong person subtracts from your own trajectory. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave, until finally, their story becomes yours. 5. Fighting someone else's battles. Another critical mistake. Rookies inherit the enemies of the unhappy and the unlucky. Toxic people come with long lists of grievances, co-workers who backstabbed them, bosses who never saw their potential, exes who destroyed their life, governments, systems, structures, fate. And the rookie? He steps in, defends them, confronts others, picks fights in their name. Without realizing, he's now fighting battles he doesn't understand. He gets entangled in vendettas that have nothing to do with him. And when the toxic person moves on, or turns on him, he's left holding the wreckage. 6. confusing potential with pattern. This is one of the most dangerous illusions. You see talent in the person, intelligence, creativity, passion, and you think they just need support, a little structure. I'll help them. But what you're seeing is potential, and potential means nothing if the person is stuck in self-sabotaging patterns. Rookies try to build empires on hope, but hope is not a foundation, it's a drug. And when you invest in someone based on who they could be, instead of who they consistently are, you're not strategic. You're gambling with your time, your sanity, and your reputation. 7. Believing you're safe because you're not like them. You might tell yourself, I don't complain like them. I have boundaries. I'll stay objective. But power doesn't work like that. If you're in the same room long enough, you become part of the same picture. Others don't separate you. They don't study your internal boundaries. They see the association, and they apply the same assumptions. Guilt by association is real, and in the power game, perception is reality. 8. Ignoring the subtle shifts in your own energy. One of the most insidious effects of being around unhappy or unlucky people is what they do to your inner world. Rookies often don't notice it at first, but then you start doubting your progress. You lose momentum. You feel drained after every interaction. You begin to echo their language. Maybe it's not fair. Maybe the system is rigged. Maybe I'm just unlucky too. This is the deepest infection, the shift in mindset. Once that takes root, it's no longer about them. It's about who you're becoming. 9. Confusing kindness with sacrifice. Lastly, rookies think it's unkind to walk away, that avoiding someone in pain is cruel, that setting boundaries makes you heartless. But here's the brutal truth. You can't save someone drowning if they're pulling you down with them. In power, kindness without clarity is suicide. And staying too long with the wrong person doesn't help them. It just destroys you both. Bottom line, the biggest rookie mistake is believing that infection looks like evil. It doesn't. It looks like sadness, like pain, like a brilliant friend stuck in a storm, like someone you love who just needs a little help. But Law 10 is not about being heartless. It's about understanding that energy is contagious, and that protecting your trajectory sometimes means making decisions that feel cruel in the moment, but are wise in the long run. Avoiding the unhappy and unlucky isn't betrayal. It's survival, and it's the only way to stay sharp, clean, and ready for your own battles. Actionable tactics. How to detect, deflect, and defend against contagious energy. You've seen what happens when people get infected. Their dreams slow down. Their confidence withers. Their energy, once sharp, becomes foggy and erratic. The worst part? They never even noticed when it started. That's why mastering this law isn't optional. It's survival. The unhappy and the unlucky don't always wear signs. They don't announce their dysfunction. They simply leak it into your life in ways so subtle they bypass your defenses. If you want to stay clean, clear, and focused on your own path, here's how you do it. With surgical precision. 1. Master the art of energetic scanning. Before you even engage, scan. Everyone emits a frequency. Some pull you upward. Others drag you into their storm. Start asking, what do I feel after I interact with this person, energized or drained? Do they talk about solutions or stay addicted to problems? Are they moving forward or recycling the same narrative? If they leave you confused, heavy, or unmotivated, trust the signal. Your body is smarter than your logic. It senses infection before your mind can rationalize it away. 2. Spot the red flags early. In life and business, here are the warning signs of contagious negativity. Perpetual victimhood. They're always the ones being wronged, never responsible. Drama addiction. Conflict seems to follow them, no matter the job, the city, the partner. Energy theft. Every conversation loops back to their life, their emotions, their pain. stagnation masked as wisdom. They sound deep, but they haven't executed anything in years. Bitterness toward success. They subtly mock or discredit anyone doing well. These are not personality quirks. They are signs of an energy virus, one that's looking for a new host. 3. Build invisible walls. You don't always need to cut people off dramatically. That creates unnecessary backlash. Instead, use invisible distance. Shorten your replies. Delay your responses. Decline invitations subtly. Stay polite, but emotionally unavailable. You don't need to announce your exit. Just fade. Gently but consistently. Energy vampires lose interest when you stop feeding them. 4. Don't get pulled into the fixer role. This is how the infection spreads. You feel useful, needed, like a healer. They vent, you listen, they collapse, you lift. It feels noble, but it's emotional codependence in disguise. If someone isn't actively solving their own problems, your help doesn't heal. It enables. Your new rule: if they don't take action, you don't keep talking. Support is earned by effort, not just emotion. 5. Clean up your circle ruthlessly. Every few months, audit your network. Ask, who drains me? Who delays me? Who doubts me? Who distracts me? Be cold with this, not cruel, cold. Because power doesn't grow in noise. And if your circle is sick, your vision will be too. Trim fast. Protect your oxygen. You don't owe anyone access to your time just because they've had it before. 6. Vet collaborators like they're entering your brain. In business, one wrong hire, one toxic co-founder, one bitter client can rot your entire operation. Start vetting people not just for skill, but for emotional hygiene. Are they emotionally stable under pressure? Do they take responsibility for mistakes? Do they bring drama into meetings? Do they bounce back from failure or spiral? Look past the resume. Look at the energy patterns. You're not just hiring output. You're inviting contagion or clarity into your world. 7. Be unapologetic about your energy standards. Once you start enforcing this law, some people will call you cold, arrogant, selfish. Let them. Protecting your energy is not cruelty, it's clarity. If your life is a kingdom, your energy is the throne room. You don't let just anyone wander in with muddy boots and a sad story. Set the standard. Enforce the boundary. Let the world adapt or exit. 8. Build a firewall around your mind. Even when you distance yourself physically, you still have to guard your mind. Negativity sneaks in through doom-scrolling social media, consuming bitter commentary, watching content that subtly glamorizes failure or despair, following people who only rant, never build. This matters, because what you consume becomes what you tolerate. Feed your system with forward motion, with clarity, with ambition, with builders, not blamers. 9. Create a personal quarantine protocol. Not everyone can be avoided forever. Sometimes a toxic relative comes to visit. A team member spirals. A client breaks down. Here's how you create emergency boundaries. Time limit exposure. I have 20 minutes, then I have a hard stop. Set the frame. Let's focus on solutions. Exit early if energy drops. Your discomfort is the timer. Debrief with clarity. After the interaction, journal, shower, move, shake it off. Don't let the residue linger. Treat it like radiation. You can survive exposure, but not immersion. 10. Become a beacon, not a sponge. Don't just avoid the infected. Become someone whose energy is so clean. Others rise in your presence. Lead by demonstration. Speak less, execute more. Calm chaos with clarity. Set emotional tone in rooms. Normalize ambition, momentum, excellence. Show people what it looks like to operate clean. No complaints, no delays, no drama. Power isn't just what you protect, it's what you project. Bottom line, avoiding the unhappy and unlucky is not about being elitist. It's about respecting the architecture of your own energy. Your time is a limited currency. Your focus is a fragile superpower. And your circle is either wind in your sails or an anchor. The unhappy will drain it. The unlucky will delay it. The bitter will infect it. Your job isn't to save them. Your job is to stay sharp, so that your very presence becomes the proof that clarity and power can coexist. Conclusion: the quiet epidemic of energy. Power rarely dies in dramatic explosions. More often, it erodes in silence, eaten away by 1,000 small interactions that seem harmless at first glance. You don't lose control because of some grand mistake. You lose it because of who you let too close. A single voice of doubt, a constant victim narrative, a partner who's always late, always overwhelmed, always surrounded by bad luck. It doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like sympathy, like friendship, like being a good person. And that's the trap. In the name of kindness, you keep them near. But your vision dulls, your focus wavers, your drive decays. The most dangerous infections don't come from your enemies. They come from those who sit beside you, with stories, excuses, and emotional gravity that pulls you off course. It's not their sadness that's dangerous. It's their refusal to change, their loyalty to chaos, their unconscious need to pull others into their orbit. You can love people from a distance. You can wish them healing without joining them in the sickness. You can respect their pain and still protect your purpose, because your mission is not to be available to everyone. Your mission is to stay sharp, clear, uncontaminated. Great empires don't fall from lack of strength. They fall from within, when rot is allowed to spread unchecked through the ranks. So treat your life like a fortress. Vet who enters, audit who stays, and be ruthless with any presence that drains instead of fuels. This law is not about arrogance. It's about energetic hygiene, about building a future where your mind, your mood, and your momentum are protected at all costs. There are people in this world whose touch breaks things, not because they're evil, but because they carry storms inside them. You don't have to judge them. You just have to choose not to stand in the rain. Let others walk their path. You walk yours, clear-eyed, high-standard, uncompromising. And if you're ever unsure, ask yourself this: does this person multiply my energy or divide it? That answer will save your life. If this lesson shook something in you, it should. Because mastering power means mastering your environment, including the energy you allow into your space. Subscribe to the channel for more brutal truths like this. And next time, we dive into Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you, where you'll discover why freedom is an illusion in power games and how the strongest never give it. They lend it.